So, hello, Annie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I wanted to jump off. One of the questions that I've been thinking about since we met is what is life like living in Alaska compared to living in
Oh,
the continental United States, doing business here, living your life, finding your career?
yeah.
I imagine there are some differences.
Yeah, that was really driven home the other day. We went to Chicago, my daughters and I, over the weekend, and they've been here since they were 3 and 5. And we're driving down the road, and they are amazed at billboards. Like, they're just like, oh my gosh. Like, what they said is, it's like commercials you see in the car. And I was like, yeah, no, that's it. And then they just read every single billboard all the way down the highway. And they're like, that's hilarious. Why would you put that on there? That's so funny. This is so it was really funny watching it from their perspective and seeing the world. So I would say Alaska tends to be about 10 years behind in general. Um, we are truly the last frontier. Everybody who's up here has a very frontier mentality and an adventurer. And so that really carries on a lot. I work in urban areas that have a lot of similarities to some of the cities, but like our Anchorage is the size of Wichita, Kansas, and that's our biggest city. So you kind of have to put that in perspective a little. There's only one highway to get to places. If there's a highway at all, or there's ice roads that you can get to certain places. And when I work out in the villages, that's a whole nother ball game. So I've been to villages where they have a taxi service that will pick up different people along the way as you go. And so you don't know exactly how long your taxi ride is going to take because it's sort of like a taxi bus. So you just kind of expect the unexpected. And we say a lot of the time that we build the plane while we fly it. We're very pivotal people and always ready for a new adventure.
Very cool. So before we start getting into a lot of the details and differences, originally you're from Kansas, correct?
I
Um,
am.
perfect. Shout out to our Kansas and Nebraska people. That's our demographic. Um,
I love
but
it.
no, I don't know if we have too many in Alaska, but hopefully we will after this week.
Well, this is a bridge now. They tell me I drop
Yes,
my K's when I say Kansas, so I didn't realize I had an accent, but they're very open to the Midwestern life up here. So we'll
love it.
recruit them.
Oh, perfect. Like I was talking to Annie before we hit record on this podcast, and I said, "Man, I have been trying to convince my wife to come to Alaska for years now, and she wants to go further south. I want to go further north." But
Okay.
anyways, so
Okay.
Annie, you were originally in Kansas,
Hmm.
and you went up to Alaska. Your husband was in the military, correct?
Yeah.
And you just like screw it. We love Alaska. Let's stay here. What was that? How did that process come about?
I would say the first year when you get here, we came in February and then had one of the most magical Alaskan summers. So right now we're in that space where it never really gets dark currently. And when it's amazing, it's beyond amazing. And so that was our
Mm,
first summer. So after that, we were like, I think this is it. We moved all around the country and it felt like home. Then we hit years 2, 3, 4. And it just felt like it was so far away. And we thought, no, we're going to come back after the military. We'll get back closer to family. And I don't know, something happened around year 7 and 8 where it just got in our blood. And the kids identify as Alaskans now and want to be here. And there's something magic about it. And there's so many people whose story is we came up for 2 weeks and we just never left. And so I think it just gets to you after a while.
fair. So enough about your personal life, Annie. I don't want to dig into all of that. I mean, I do,
It's
but
so good.
that's not the purpose here. I want to talk about managing me. What is managing me, Annie? Give us a little overview of what you're doing up there in Talkeetna, Alaska, which I have never heard of in my life.
Yeah. Well, we're the only city in America that has a cat mayor, and we found that to be a very stable form of
Oh my
government.
God.
So I think that that's that's our big claim to fame.
That's
um,
that's my in with my wife. Thank
There
you.
you go.
All right.
See,
Yeah.
only one in all of America. Um, so managing me is really a business that is about creating workplaces that are better for human helpers. Looking at ways that we can move from an environment that says if we're going to be helpers, whether we're in healthcare or education or librarians or working in tribal governance or all different kinds of helping professions. I think the pandemic really broadened the definition of what a helping profession is, because we realized as workers were essential, even at Walmart and McDonald's and all these places, like they're helping people. And so looking at what is expected for helpers, I've been a nurse for 20 years. I always laugh when I say that, because when my professors in school told me I've been a nurse for 20 years, I was always like, you're really old. And now here we all are, like just really old. So going into healthcare myself, my dad's a doctor, my brother's a doctor, both my grandmas were nurses, my mom's a nurse, my sister's in nursing school. I really wanted to help people. And right off the bat, when I went in, I started at KU in neurosurgical ICU. And my premise for work was I am just not going to go to the bathroom my whole shift, because if you're not with the patients, you're not being a good nurse. And so, yeah, I'm just going to not do that. And so it naturally followed that if I'm not going to go to the bathroom, then I'm not going to eat or drink on my shift, because that just literally feeds the problem. And so the entire premise of my whole career was I am going to be superhuman. I'm going to take Maslow's hierarchy at that bottom level, and I'm just going to say that doesn't apply to me, and I'm going to work harder. And there was never a day that I came into work where they told me, we have helped all the people. Like all the people are helped. We're done. It's a good day for you to get to be a person. It was like every day, am I going to help stabilize someone after a traumatic brain injury? Am I going to literally adjust their brain fluid and help them stay alive? Or am I going to go to the grocery store or take a nap? And which of those things seems more important? And it was never the things that made me human. It was always the things that were helping. And so building my career off of that, I really set a path for myself that was unsustainable. And so fast forward 15 years down the road, I was the head of a hospital that treats PTSD. And I ended up having a couple of really hard things happen. I had a really credible death threat from a patient who was a sniper in the military, who was very able to carry it out, who the board of nursing at the time published our home addresses online so he could know where I was, he could know where my kids were. And it was really, really scary. And so I had that. Our family was going through some big transitions, and the organization that I was working for, even though we had 18 months of zero nurse turnover, which was completely unheard of within our organization, and we were making money, we had really high patient and employee satisfaction scores, and we were making money, it wasn't as much money as the corporation wanted to. And so they made some decisions that made it so I couldn't keep my patients and my staff safe. And because of that, I just ended up having this really intense break where I didn't know what to do, where to go, started having these really dark, intrusive thoughts, started feeling really impulsive, and ended up having to check myself into the hospital for PTSD treatment myself. And I spent a couple weeks here in Alaska at a hospital, and then went down to Arizona for 6 weeks. I was gone for a total of 2 months. And while I was gone, I missed my daughter's birthday. And I just realized, God, if your whole life is about helping people, what are you doing? And so the biggest thing I learned while I was there was that I'm just a person. And coming back out, I realized that we have all of these organizations that have 15 people's worth of work and 10 people's worth of people, but it's going to be okay because we're going to give extra. We're going to do more. We're going to go beyond. And our whole systems are built off of that. And so I started looking at it and really thinking about what could we do to make that different. And long term, the more stable motivations for work, pro-social motivation is great, but it tends to burn us out. And so what about extrinsic and intrinsic? Extrinsic motivators like pay and benefits, that can be tough. And we really kind of tooled that out. I think we had a rumor that a hospital up here paid like $150,000 for one nurse for a 13-week contract. And that's just not a sustainable model, right? And so we have to be able to look at how can we make environments good for humans to work, where people feel excited about coming to work, where they feel like they have an ability to get stuff done, where they enjoy the people that they're working with, that they enjoy the work for what it is, and that we have a place where people are allowed to be humans. And so that's what we get to. It's kind of weird to get to make up a job for yourself, but that's pretty much what happened. And it's been really amazing just getting to create spaces where people can be human and to share my story, and then to let them start to share theirs and feel safe sharing theirs too.
With these helping positions, is it something where it's getting progressively more difficult to be in them? I mean, you talked about even
Yeah.
when you started in your career was already feeling like you had to be superhuman, but it's seemingly more there's more and more openings in the helping professions today, nursing, all those things. Is just the whole industry itself working in that becoming more and more difficult, or how is it playing out compared to where it's been historically?
Oh, it's such a good question. I think that the pandemic really changed a lot because, if you're going to be motivated for helping people, if that's going to be the motivation that keeps you coming in, and all of a sudden the public doesn't trust you and you're the bad guys, and you're having not just some weird conversations with, Uncle Waldo at Thanksgiving, but all of a sudden you're having them constantly, and you're exposed to death and dying on a whole nother level, and you don't have enough resources to do the job. And there's just not enough people. The factors of the pandemic and the factors of burnout and compassion fatigue were really just the same list. It was the same stuff. And so I think that the stat was that in the UK, 3 in 5 nurses wanted to quit the entire profession 3 months into the pandemic, and we hadn't even gotten started and up here. And so it exposed some lies that had always been true, because we were always building off of this idea that everybody's going to give more. But then we started to bring people out of retirement. We started to bring people out of school early, and we just turned up the fire of how fast we burned people up. And so I think that a couple of things are happening right now. I think that people are really struggling with the change in the relationship with the public, and the lack of public trust in basic institutions within our helping organizations, and kind of the adversarial relationship, and how do we find our space as helpers when we're not just uniformly the good guys all the time. I think that's one thing. I think we've got 5 generations working within the workplace right now, and this new generation has some really cool thoughts about what they want to see. They want to see a better work-life balance. They want to see space to be humans, and we're having to redefine professionalism and just basic stuff, I think, in a way that's as significant as the Industrial Revolution. And so for this generation of workers, we have to find a way to take us from where we are to this new space. And if you look at what happened at the last pandemic, because I thought maybe all this stuff is just because of social media and all that, but I was looking at what happened in the last pandemic, and what we had in that 40-year period was you had pandemic, you had major social and civil divide, you had a severe economic downturn, you had technology that was widely available to people for the very first time that hadn't been available before, that changed their daily life, and you had world war. And if you look at what's happening for us, like, a couple of those things might sound a little familiar, because it's not over 40 years, it's over a much more truncated time frame. And so I think that it's the coming together of people losing bandwidth and not being able to run at giving extra, that whole quiet quitting movement and all of that. We don't have 1+ FTE to give anymore. We barely even have one. And we're redefining what our priorities are. And I think that it's making the conversation within helping professions and with helping organizations very, very different than it's been in the past, because we have no choice, which is kind of a blessing, honestly. It's broken so badly. We have to address the things that have always been wrong, but have just kind of become an emergency.
So what's the approach? I've considered this before. I remember during COVID, during that year of isolation, give or take, nurses were heroes and food service workers were heroes, and all of this, and I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in my house eating Cheetos and working from my basement. So yeah, applause those people.
Yeah.
But I thought about it even back then. I was like, wait a second. Well, why didn't we think this, a year ago or 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And is it just going to go back? We've all heard the stories of massive burnout, especially for healthcare workers.
Mhm.
Gosh, I wish I knew the statistic and I had it prepped up, but there's something like a lot of healthcare
Yeah.
workers are just
That's
leaving.
approximately the number. Yep. I can get.
Yes, exactly. That's my professional estimate. What's the solution? Because for one year they were raised on everyone's shoulders and cheered and applauded, and now those same people who were heroes, exactly as you're leading to,
Yeah.
just burnt out,
Yeah.
and they worked 20 hours a day nonstop
Mhm.
every day, and they're done. What's the solution for that?
It's been so interesting because when I first came to Alaska, I had this opportunity to sit down with a whole bunch of Alaska Native elders. I have a master's degree in nursing leadership and administration. I've completed half a doctorate in psychology. And as part of that doctoral work, I got to sit down with these Alaska Native elders, and I had no idea how cool it was because these are like internationally known figures who are like the most incredible people. And I was just like getting to chill out with them for a week. And I remember we were in this talking circle. It was my first experience of a talking circle. And the elders went first. And what was remarkable was they just shared what they were struggling with. They didn't moralize it and say, actually, you could be awesome if you were just like me. They didn't say they had it all together. They just said, this is the reality. This is my life. This is what's going on right now. And what I watched happen around this circle was it opened up a place of space and safety and authenticity that let everybody share what was going on. And so our company has really come from the approach that we want to create spaces where people can have the real discussions. And so when we go into any of our sessions, um, we start out at that really kind of superficial place. Everybody's in work mode, you know what I mean? We're going to come in, we're going to do another training, like it's going to be whenever. And so the first thing I say is, guys, if what we're doing today is cool for you, if this is good for you, awesome. I love that. If what you need today is to go out and take a nap in your car, or you need to go play on your phone, or you need to go for a walk, or you just need to go do nothing during this time, I really sincerely am giving this time back. Because if this matters, it matters. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And let's just do things that matter. I've done so many things in my life that didn't matter. I'm not into it for myself, not into it for anybody else. So I give them permission to leave, give them some of that self-efficacy back right from the beginning. And then I just share my story. I share where I've been. And through the day, I share these zillions of examples of times I've messed up or times I've struggled or things that haven't gone the way that I hoped that they would, and open it up for them to share their stories. And what's really incredible, whether I'm working with, top state officials, whether I'm working with frontline library workers, whether I'm working with community health aides out in the villages, when you do that, and when you make some space where people can tell their story, you don't ever know what's going to happen, but it's going to be magic. It's going to be different. It's going to be real. And so I think that what I've learned is it's fantastic where we can, we do a lot of change management and strategic planning and process improvement and all that stuff. But if we're not taking the human element in, if we're not really being real with each other, we're just writing stuff to sit up on a shelf somewhere. And so I think what we really focus on is, what is the reality of this moment? What are we doing that has resonance with what we actually feel and what we experience? And what can we say we're not going to do in addition to what we're going to do? One of the examples that we're using, it wasn't my metaphor, but it's a fantastic one. And it's been getting a ton of traction around all of the groups that we've been working with, is if you're juggling too many balls, what are your glass balls today? And what are your plastic balls? What can we afford to let drop? And what do we need to make sure stays up in the air? And what's my glass ball today might be my plastic ball next week. And what my plastic ball is right now, glass ball, maybe my glass ball in 2 months, And so that changes. But being able to really say, this is what we're going to do, but this is what we're not going to do. This is the helping that's not for us, I think is the most pivotal thing that we look at. And so we really try to help organizations just embrace the realities, because one thing that has been really important for me is recognizing that if I don't have a problem, there are no solutions. If I don't have an issue, there is no reason to find a now what. Now what only happens when we embrace reality as it is, when we're able to boldly declare, yeah, this is what it is. Kind of sucks. There was an example of that one time when I was working in an inpatient mental health hospital. And we had some really, really, it was an adolescent and children's hospital. We had some really violent kids who were trying to initiate other kids into gangs by breaking their wrists and stuff like that. The staff had lost teeth in altercations with kids and were getting really like legitimately hurt. And we were short staffed. And so I went to the administration I was going to be the only leader in the building overnight. And I said, hey, like, what are we going to do? And they sat around and we admired the problem for about 30 minutes. And then it was time for them to go home. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, what are we going to do though? Because we didn't actually come up with a solution. And they said, what about pizza? Do you think the staff would enjoy pizza? And I was like, I mean, I guess I think with whatever teeth they have left to eat it with. I mean, my God, I don't know. And then they're like, well, why don't you just order pizza? And I said, okay, is there like a corporate credit card? And they're like, no, if you could just order, we'll get you back. And I said, so the plan for this overly violent situation we have is that I am going to buy pizza for the entire hospital and you're just going to get me back. And they're like, yeah, no, I think that's solid. Let's do that. So I go into shift change. Everybody's looking like they've just come out of a war because they have, they look just terrible. And I'm just looking around the room and I'm thinking, what am I going to say to these people? I'm definitely not going to tell them about the pizza. That's not going to go over well. That's not going to be the thing. And I was like, well, maybe I just tell them the truth. And I said, all right, guys, you know what? This sucks. This sucks. It's too violent. This is not the right patient demographic for our hospital. We're short-staffed. And this is not the way things should be. This is messed up. And yeah, it sucks. And the entire room just went, and I didn't tell them anything they didn't already know. Everybody in the room knew that, but I was just saying it out loud and just acknowledging it. And I said, you know what, guys, here's the thing. We're not going to get any therapy groups done tonight. We could pretend like we're not. Like, that's not going to happen. So we're going to have exactly 3 goals tonight. We are going to keep the kids safe. We are going to keep us safe. And we're all still going to be in the building when the morning comes. That's the 3 things we're going to do tonight. And they got pumped. They were like, oh my gosh, yes, okay, we can do that. And they were like all of a sudden running black ops. They were bringing one group up in the elevator while the other group was coming up in the stairwell. And they were like coordinating it all. And we had one of the best nights we've ever had. And the thing about it is it's just because there was space to stay what the reality was and to adjust the plan accordingly. To say, what are we going to do based on life as it really, truly is? And I think that that's been the most revolutionary thing that we've been able to do with teams is just to create space, to have conversations about what's realistic. We can say all kinds of things all day long, but if it's not realistic, if it doesn't hit the felt experience of the people that actually have to do the stuff, it does not matter at all. And life is precious and short, and let's do things that matter. So that's really where we spend our time, is figuring out how we can be people and how we can do what's realistic together.
So first off, I love that their suggestion was a pizza party. That just validated all of my corporate experience in my lifetime.
Thank you.
But if I can paraphrase, what I think you just said there is, you really focused on being real. And this is that struck a chord with me. This is something that has personally bugged me in my corporate life. Is it all feels very phony. It all feels very rah, let's have a pizza party and everything will be fine and just go back to work. And that's bugged me for a really long time. And I love your messaging, and I'm really excited to learn more, because getting people to a real state, especially in a work environment, I imagine that's got to be really tough for you, right? Is it easy for you to break down those walls sometimes?
To be honest, yes, it is. It is easy, because when you go first and you just say your thing, when you don't have to be, the biggest mistake I made in the beginning of my business is I thought I had to be so clever. I thought I had to have all of these answers. I thought I had to be really amazing. That's not what I needed to be. I just needed to be real. And it's really simple stuff. The stuff that we interact on, the stuff that trips us up, it's all the same stuff that we did on the playground growing up. It's all the same insecurities. It's all the same misconnections. It's all the same stuff. And if you look at it, all the work that we do is built on this thing called relational leadership theory. And basically just says that the truth of the organization is cool that we have mission and vision statements and all that. But the true reality of what people feel within an organization is about the people who make up that organization and the interactions between them. And so it's always living and moving and fluid. And so if one person comes into the organization, it changes that person of the organization. And if one person leaves, it changes the person of the organization. If I'm having a really great day today and a really tough day tomorrow, it changes the person of the organization. And when you look at it, systems problems are not like working on a machine, it's working on an organism. So you have the individuals as like the cells, and the teams as the tissues, and the organizations as the organs, and then the whole system as the organism. And you can't say to any part of that, if just the tissues were healthy, everything else would be fine. If just the cells would pick it up, we'd be all good. If just the organs could get it together. Everything has interaction after interaction after interaction. And that's what makes it so hard to get our arms around systems change. But that's what makes it so exciting, is because if I start to be able to see you and connect with you and be real with you, and you start to be able to see me, ideas and philosophies and political opinions are so divisive right now. But if you can hear my story and I can hear your story, it doesn't matter what else. I can see you and I can start to come together with you. Because if we're having an email exchange and I'm having a real hard day and I get an email from you and I put 3 less exclamation points in my response to you, and you're like, didn't care for that, that was a little abrupt. So you send me an email with no exclamation points at all. And I'm like, I don't care for that, Wyatt. That was rude and terrible. And I have a lot of other things to do today. So I think I'm not going to do anything, but I am going to send you back a 1-word email with a period at the end. Sure. And now we're in a thing. And the productivity on our team has now slowed to a halt because we're both having an experience of one another that is mediated by technology, by a lack of connection, by a lack of being able to see each other. And so we have to come back. And what we've been noticing is that as telehealth and AI and telework increase, which are amazing, amazing tools, there is an equal and urgent need for real human connection in the midst of that. And so how do we start to build that simultaneously? How do we start to be able to use what we're doing with technology to give more space for real human interaction? And it is not going to happen on accident. And so being able to be the one that goes first, that can look stupid first, that can look silly first, that can have not everything together and invite other people to be imperfect with me, that has been a revolutionary experience. And I feel the room change every time I tell my story. And I see the looks on people's faces and what happens in the room. You feel the air change, and nothing is ever the same after that. And even when I used to be real scared when teams would start to fight in one of our sessions, because I'd be like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? This is terrible. They're fighting. I'm not awesome at this. Like, I don't know. But I learned that if I would immediately just lean in and say, guys, this is awesome. Thank you so much for being so real. All this stuff was already here. We didn't invent this. Everybody was just not talking about it. You guys brought it here. That was super brave. We have the time set aside. I'm here to help. Why don't we just work on this right now? Can I have your permission? And as soon as I lean into being uncomfortable with them, sometimes I even say, it's real spicy in here today. It's super uncomfortable, isn't it? Like, my gosh, thanks guys for hanging in. This is hard. This is why people don't do this, but we're here and we're in it and we're going to be okay. If I can set that tone from the beginning, if I can embrace my own discomfort, my own flaws, my own limitations, and share that ownership with everybody in the room, people can pretty much solve their own problems after that, because they come together and they find real solutions based on what they really feel, what they really think. And it's a pretty powerful thing.
So to get a lot of the transformation, though, it feels like the call has to be taken from the top. So how do you get the leaders within a hospital or any
Yeah.
organization really on board with this? Because in your story with the pizza example, things were still terrible,
Yeah,
and you can make
they
it through
were.
the night, but if the next day is like that and the next day is like that, you can only last so long. So how do you go about actually getting these things in place across all levels of the organization and make things better?
It's been a really serendipitous journey that I feel totally lucky and blessed to have been on, because, I started my company in 2020, which again, just groundbreaking time, very, very insightful time to start a business. Like January 2020 really read the
Oh
market.
no. Yeah.
Exactly.
Ooh.
It was all
You had
in
like
person.
you had 2 months
I know,
before
it was
the shit hit the
blissful. And
fan,
then it
huh?
was just like,
Yeah.
oh, now we're in trouble. So we, it hit. I was all in person, and it was very clear pretty quickly that's not going to work out. My kids went home from spring break, and they were like, "We're going to take 2 weeks off to get the pandemic under control." And I was like, "I don't think that's the way pandemics work, but I don't know. I'm not like an expert, but that seems optimistic." So we did not do that, but I really wanted to help somehow, and so the university was starting a contact tracing team, and it ended up being the largest contact tracing team in Alaska. And by total fluke of whatever, I got to be the head of this team. We weren't supposed to manage any employees. We ended up going from 0 to 40 employees in 2 months, and then 40 to 250 in 4 months, with no internal infrastructure for employee management whatsoever at all. I had just finished my master's degree. I'd written my program for resilience recovery, and I got to create a team from scratch. We did no interviews with anybody. If you could make it through the training, you were on the team. We had everybody from right out of high school to coming out of retirement. We had people all over Alaska and even outside of Alaska. We had people from every walk of life. And I got to build in almost a laboratory kind of experiment, an atmosphere based on this program I had written. And it was a really incredible experience. It was one of my favorite work experiences up to that point. We had this incredible team culture that we were able to build. There were some big surprises about what a really healthy team looks like that I did not foresee. And we started sharing that with our state partners. And they liked it so much that at the end of contact tracing, there was all this money coming into the state government for workforce revitalization. And so they gave us an $800 or $800,000 grant to the university license my program. And we had $800,000 to implement it statewide. And so we got to work with the top state officials at the Division of Public Health. And then from there, it's spread out to working with almost the entire Department of Health. We work with Senior and Disability Services, Division of Public Assistance, Division of Behavioral Health, Medicare, Medicaid office. And then it spread from there to the largest municipal health department, the largest municipal library system, and one of the largest tribal consortiums that's over 42 tribes in Alaska. And so it really has just been connection after connection after connection. And I've learned that every room is the same. You just need to get in it. And so really connecting with leaders and letting them be real and be themselves first. That's a big place that we've started. We've gotten a lot of traction. The chief medical officer for the state of Alaska, who just stepped down, Ann Zeke, was totally amazing. The current commissioner for the Department of Health, Heidi Hedberg, have both been amazing cheerleaders of the work that we've done and just shared it with other leaders who then have contacted us, who then have contacted other leaders. And so I think really letting the leaders themselves start with being human to start before we help your teams. Let's help you. Let's talk about what's going on with you. Let's talk about where you're at. And then what they've wanted to do was take what they experienced and spread that to their teams. And so then we've also helped, because we work across a lot of different teams that work together, different organizations that work together. We've also been being able to build shared language. Even like the glass ball, plastic ball thing is starting to be talked about between organizations when they come together for change management projects. How are we going to roll this out? What are we going to make the glass balls? What are we going to make the plastic ones? And so I think it's just the power of community has really been what it is. And it's been infectious in a really exciting way. And we just found out from, we've been working with Anchorage Health Department for a couple of years, and they've seen their attrition rates in that time fall by about half during that time we've been able to be together, because of the dedication of their leadership and just the cool things that we've gotten to do there. So I think that, again, when you start with how can we let the leaders view themselves as people, reconnect to who they are, reconnect to what their needs are, stop dissociating from the realities, then they're ready to go in and transform their organizations. And that's a pretty cool thing.
Well, sign me up for the philosophy of Annie. But
It's a dangerous thing, my friend.
gosh, you're You're hitting on things that have bugged me for a long time. This is great. So I want to switch gears just a little bit. Now that I understand what you do, your philosophy a little bit more, being an entrepreneurship podcast, I have to ask this question. If someone told me they were going to start a consulting, training, and speaking engagement company focused on bringing people together and having real honest discussions, but they were going to be in Talkeetna, Alaska, or Anchorage, if you want to, pretend you live in the big city, um, I think I'd be really skeptical at your success. So let's flip gears a little bit and talk to me about what it's like to run your kind of business in as far rural as you get in the United States. What
Yeah.
are some of those obstacles and how do you overcome those?
Well, number one, I think one of the things that I kind of had to change my mindset on was how I viewed opportunity. Because here in Alaska, we have the same, you know, structures, in terms of government and organizations and that kind of stuff. But the degrees of separation between you and anybody in Alaska, pretty small. So Alaska has some really big challenges. We have the highest suicide rate in males 18 to 24. We have some of the highest rates of fetal alcohol syndrome. We have really high rates of TB and other things. So we have some really huge struggles. But what I learned really early on was that when we can make a difference in those things, that gets national attention very, very quickly. And the connections that I have and the proof of concept that I have for, what we've been able to do in state government here, you don't get discounted because it's Alaska and we got there easier. It still has the same weight when you go over to another state and say, I worked with this health department, let me work with yours. So I think I had to change the way that I looked at opportunity, number one. Number two, I think that being able to think in a really fluid, flexible way. In Alaska, you never know what's going to happen. And I went into a 3-day strategic planning project with one of the teams that I was working with, and it was an hour before the event. And the director of this team came to me and she said, I have revamped the agenda. And I said, okay, yeah, great. And she goes, don't freak out. I was just like, I'm ready. Just show
Never
me
a
what it
good
is.
start.
So I know, love it. And I was like, okay, let's lay it on me. She had deleted the entire agenda and it was just blanks next to my name for 3 days, like an hour before it starts, right? And I was like, this is awesome. Let's roll. Let's do it. And it was fantastic. She told me what she wanted to get done and we did it. And it was really cool. And one of the things that I tell my teams is like, when I bring in an agenda, it may happen, it may not. We're going to stay with the felt experience of where it is. And I think that one of the biggest things that I've had to really come to grips with is being an A student and being an overachiever. Like, I really want to make everybody like me all the time. But the truth is, I'm for some people, I'm not for everybody. And that's okay. And the doors that are open, run through those doors. The doors that are closing, don't waste your time trying to kick them in. Don't waste your time trying to prop them open. Like, go through the doors that are open for you. Go to the places that are ready for you. And I think that being able to take on all kinds of different opportunities, but still know who we are, and know what we're bringing and bring that same thing every single time, but with an ability to pivot it towards who is there and what's happening. I think it has helped a lot. My dad gave me some advice really early on. My first experience with entrepreneurship was when I was 8 and I was painting rocks with personalized names on them at the side of the road in our tiny little town in Kansas. And I watched my dad, I was born when my dad was still in college and he went through med school and residency, his first practice, and then he invents medical products. And I watched him be an entrepreneur my whole life. And so I had a really good example. And one of the things that he told me was, whatever business you're in, whatever job you have, learn as much as you can about whatever it is beyond your job, beyond anything, and look for opportunities to grow it, and you'll never waste time. And I think that that's been the best advice that I've had throughout my whole life, is just looking at every opportunity as what might be able to happen, what might be able to happen here. And so I'll go to conferences and I market to the vendors ideas about what we might be able to do together. And nobody's marketing to the vendors, right? And so, it's really fun because you get to have cool experiences and talks just by looking at, the Yeah, I don't know what might be here, but let's try it. And I think that that's what Alaska's been all about. If you have a really um, rigid mindset that needs things to go a certain way, that's probably going to be pretty rough in rural Alaska. When we looked at our house, we had just had 40 inches of snow that week, and we bought our 20 acres, seeing about half an acre because there was no like we couldn't even get into all of the places because there's 40. I mean, it's taller than like about as tall as me. So like it was you just have to be you have to be ready and you have to be flexible and see it as an adventure because that's what it is. It's an adventure and that never gets old.
Great answer.
Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you online and learn more about your systems and stuff?
Yeah, I'd love to visit with people. You can check us out at managingmeenterprises.com. I'm also on LinkedIn under Managing Me Enterprises and Annie Thomas-Landrum. We love to connect with people and even just have conversations if they are looking for a place to just connect and be heard. We're always ready to do that. And yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. This was amazing.
Yeah, we absolutely loved having you. And there's quite a few notes that I got from this one, and I saw why it was taking them as well. So really appreciate you sharing with us today all the stuff that you've been working on and your unique take on it because, yeah, I feel like you're going the right direction with it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you for your realness, Annie. I appreciate you're kind of a breath of fresh air in the corporate world sometimes. So I love it.
Thank you. Thank
All
you
right.
both.
Well, with that, we will see everybody next week. Bye bye.